There comes a moment in every person's life when they must ask a difficult question. Am I being kind, or am I allowing myself to be used? Many people spend years believing that if they love harder, forgive faster, stay quieter, and sacrifice more, difficult people will eventually appreciate them. But life teaches a painful lesson. Not every person values your kindness. Some study it. Some exploit it. Some mistake your patience for permission. One of the greatest mistakes good-hearted people make is believing that kindness alone can transform a destructive character. They think more understanding will create respect. More giving will create gratitude. More silence will create peace. Yet the opposite often happens. The more they surrender themselves, the more they lose themselves. Real wisdom teaches that love without truth becomes slavery. Compassion without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Forgiveness without discernment becomes repeated suffering. Today, we are not talking about becoming cold, bitter, or hateful. We are talking about becoming wise. We are talking about protecting the value of the life you have been entrusted with. Because your peace has value, your purpose has value, your dignity has value, and anything valuable must be protected. If you continue trying to win the approval of someone who only values control, you will eventually lose the approval of the one person whose opinion matters most, your own. So today you are going to learn something that may completely change the way you approach difficult relationships. You will discover why being endlessly nice is not always a virtue, why wisdom must guide compassion, and what you should do instead if you truly want to protect your future. Because the strongest person in the room is not the loudest person, nor the most aggressive. The strongest person is the one who knows when to love, when to forgive, when to speak, when to walk away, and when to refuse to surrender their identity for someone else's comfort. Let's begin. Most people grow up believing that being nice is always the right thing to do. They are taught to be patient, forgiving, generous, understanding, and willing to give others another chance. These are beautiful qualities, and they can build strong families, meaningful friendships, and successful communities. But there is a truth that many people never learn until life forces them to learn it through pain. Kindness without wisdom becomes vulnerability. A good heart is a gift, but a good heart without discernment can become an open door for people who have no intention of respecting it. There is an important difference between kindness and weakness. Kindness is a decision made from a position of strength. Weakness is surrendering your peace because you are afraid of disappointing someone else. Kindness says, I choose to help because it is right. Weakness says, I must keep helping even when it destroys me because I fear rejection. These may look similar on the outside, but they come from completely different foundations. One is rooted in confidence, the other is rooted in fear. People who manipulate others understand this difference very well. They can recognize someone who struggles to say no. They notice the person who apologizes for everything, even when they have done nothing wrong. They observe the individual who constantly explains themselves, hoping to avoid conflict. They pay attention to the person who sacrifices their own needs just to keep everyone else comfortable. What begins as kindness slowly becomes a pattern of self-neglect. Every time you ignore your own emotional well-being to protect someone else's unhealthy behavior, you send a message. You may never speak the words aloud, but your actions communicate them clearly. My needs matter less than yours. Unfortunately, unhealthy people often hear that message and decide to take even more. They do not always appreciate your generosity. They simply adjust their expectations. What once seemed extraordinary soon becomes something they believe they deserve. Think about this carefully. Respect is not built by constantly proving your willingness to endure mistreatment. Respect grows when people recognize that you value yourself enough to protect your peace. Every healthy relationship depends on mutual honor, not endless sacrifice from one person and endless demands from the other. If only one person carries the weight of understanding, forgiving, compromising, and giving, that relationship has already become unbalanced. Many people confuse avoiding conflict with creating peace. But silence is not always peace. Sometimes silence is simply postponed pain. Every ignored insult, every overlooked manipulation, every accepted act of disrespect quietly accumulates within the heart. Eventually, the person who has remained silent for years feels emotionally exhausted, confused, and empty. They wonder why they have nothing left to give. The answer is simple. They have been pouring into someone else while neglecting the condition of their own soul. Never forget this principle. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. If your emotional strength is constantly drained by people who refuse to honor your value, eventually you will lose the energy needed to pursue your purpose. Your dreams will become smaller because your confidence has become weaker. Your vision will become blurry because your focus has been consumed by someone else's chaos. There is also a dangerous belief that if you are just patient enough, loving enough, or accommodating enough, people who mistreat you will eventually change. While personal growth is possible for anyone, transformation cannot be forced from the outside. Real change begins when an individual accepts responsibility for their own actions. Until that happens, your endless kindness cannot create the character they refuse to develop. Wisdom teaches us that every valuable thing requires protection. We lock the doors of our homes not because we hate people, but because we value what is inside. We protect our finances because we understand their importance. We guard our health because we know life depends on it. Yet many people leave their hearts completely unguarded, allowing anyone to enter, take, criticize, manipulate, and wound them repeatedly. This is not compassion. It is carelessness with one of the greatest treasures you possess. You were never created to become someone else's emotional punching bag. You were never designed to spend your life proving your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your value was established long before anyone formed an opinion about you. Their inability to appreciate your worth does not reduce your worth. A diamond remains valuable even if someone mistakes it for an ordinary stone. Strength is not measured by how much pain you can tolerate. True strength is measured by your willingness to protect what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. Sometimes the strongest sentence you will ever speak contains only 2 letters: no. That simple word has the power to protect your peace, preserve your dignity, and redirect the course of your future. Saying no to manipulation is saying yes to your purpose. Saying no to disrespect is saying yes to your self-respect. As you continue through life, remember this lesson. Never allow your beautiful heart to become permission for someone else's destructive behavior. Continue to be compassionate. Continue to be generous. Continue to forgive. But let wisdom lead your kindness. Let discernment guide your compassion. Let self-respect stand beside your love. Because the strongest people are not those who allow everyone to walk over them. The strongest people are those who know the value of their own lives, protect their peace with quiet confidence, and refuse to exchange their dignity for the temporary approval of people who never intended to honor it in the first place. One of the greatest misunderstandings in human relationships is believing that if you simply love someone more, they will eventually love you the same way in return. Many people spend years trying to earn appreciation through endless giving. They become more available, more patient, more forgiving, and more accommodating, hoping that one day the other person will finally recognize their loyalty and respond with gratitude. But there are relationships where the harder you try to please the other person, the more control they gain over you. This is one of the most painful lessons a person can learn. There are individuals who are not searching for genuine connection as much as they are searching for constant validation. Their sense of importance depends on receiving attention, admiration, agreement, and emotional reactions from the people around them. Instead of building relationships based on mutual respect, they often measure their value by how much influence they can maintain over others. When someone constantly adjusts their behavior to keep such a person happy, they unintentionally reinforce the very pattern that keeps them trapped. Think about what happens when every conversation revolves around one person's needs. Their victories are celebrated, but your accomplishments are ignored. Their emotions demand immediate attention, but your struggles are dismissed or minimized. Their mistakes are excused, while your smallest imperfections become subjects of criticism. Over time, you begin to believe that maintaining their happiness is your responsibility. Without realizing it, you slowly hand over the authority that belongs to you. This is why constantly seeking the approval of someone who thrives on control is so exhausting. Approval becomes like a moving target. The moment you meet one expectation, another appears. You solve one complaint only to hear another criticism. You sacrifice one desire only to be asked to surrender something else. The finish line never stays in the same place because the goal was never your improvement. The goal was to keep you chasing acceptance that is intentionally kept just beyond your reach. A person who depends on controlling others often understands the power of inconsistency. They may offer moments of praise, affection, or kindness, just often enough to keep hope alive. Then those moments disappear, replaced by distance, criticism, or emotional withdrawal. This cycle creates confusion. You begin working harder, believing you simply need to do more to restore the good moments. But instead of building a healthy relationship, you become emotionally conditioned to chase approval that is given only in small, unpredictable amounts. This pattern affects far more than your emotions. It begins to reshape your identity. You stop asking yourself, what do I believe? And start asking, what will make them happy? You stop pursuing your own goals because all your energy is spent preventing conflict. Your confidence becomes dependent on someone else's opinion instead of your own convictions. The person you once were slowly disappears beneath the weight of trying to satisfy expectations that can never truly be satisfied. Healthy relationships do not require you to abandon yourself in order to preserve them. They allow honesty without fear. They encourage growth without humiliation. They create space for disagreement without punishment. Respect flows in both directions. Appreciation is expressed freely, not withheld as a reward for obedience. In a healthy relationship, love inspires freedom. In an unhealthy one, approval becomes a tool for control. You must also understand that constant validation is not the same as genuine love. Real love wants to see you become stronger, wiser, and more confident. It celebrates your progress instead of feeling threatened by it. It respects your individuality rather than demanding complete conformity. It does not require you to shrink your dreams, silence your voice, or ignore your values simply to maintain peace. One of the greatest sources of personal freedom comes when you stop measuring your worth by the reactions of people who refuse to see your value. The opinions of others may influence your emotions, but they should never define your identity. Your value is not determined by how much applause you receive or how often someone chooses to compliment you. Lasting confidence is built from understanding who you are, what you stand for, and what principles guide your life. This is why emotional independence is so important. It does not mean becoming cold, isolated, or unwilling to love. It means refusing to let another person's approval become the foundation of your self-esteem. When your confidence comes from your character instead of someone else's praise, manipulation loses much of its power. You become steady because your identity is no longer controlled by changing opinions or unpredictable moods. There will always be people who misunderstand you, criticize you, or withhold appreciation for reasons that have nothing to do with your worth. If you spend your entire life trying to satisfy every one of them, you will never experience peace. Instead, focus on becoming a person of integrity. Let your actions reflect your values. Let your words align with truth. Let your decisions be guided by wisdom rather than by fear of rejection. Remember this principle. Every time you sacrifice your dignity to gain temporary approval, you lose something far more valuable than acceptance. You lose a piece of your confidence. But every time you choose honesty over people-pleasing, boundaries over manipulation, and self-respect over unhealthy attachment, you reclaim that confidence. You remind yourself that your purpose is too important to be governed by someone else's need for control. Do not spend your life chasing validation from those who only appreciate you when you are easy to control. Invest your energy in becoming a person whose confidence is rooted in truth, whose peace is protected by wisdom, and whose relationships are built on mutual honor rather than emotional dependence. When you stop living for constant approval, you discover something far greater: the freedom to live according to your purpose, your principles, and the value that has always existed within you. One of the clearest reflections of how much you value yourself is found in the boundaries you are willing to establish. Many people think boundaries are walls that push others away, but that is a misunderstanding. Healthy boundaries are not built to keep love out. They are built to keep disrespect from taking over. They are not signs of selfishness. They are signs of wisdom. They communicate without anger or hostility that your life has value, your time has value, your peace has value, and your dignity is not available for negotiation. Too many people have been taught that saying yes to everyone is the definition of being a good person. They believe that constantly sacrificing their own needs makes them noble. They fear that if they ever say no, they will disappoint others, appear uncaring, or lose important relationships. But consider this carefully. If the only way to keep a relationship is by abandoning yourself, then what exactly are you preserving? A relationship built on the destruction of your identity is not a relationship that brings life. It is one that slowly drains it. Every meaningful relationship requires responsibility from both sides. Respect cannot survive where only one person carries the burden of understanding, forgiving, compromising, and giving. If one person is constantly expected to adjust while the other refuses to change, the relationship becomes unbalanced. Eventually, the person who keeps sacrificing begins to feel invisible. Their opinions no longer matter. Their feelings are overlooked. Their dreams are postponed. They become so focused on maintaining someone else's comfort that they lose connection with their own purpose. Boundaries interrupt this unhealthy pattern. They declare that love and respect must walk together. They remind others that kindness does not mean unlimited access to your emotions, your energy, or your time. Every healthy relationship has limits because every healthy individual recognizes that life is made up of valuable resources. Your attention is a resource. Your emotional strength is a resource. Your mental peace is a resource. Your time is a resource. Once these resources are exhausted, they cannot simply be replaced overnight. Imagine a farmer who never places a fence around his field. He works tirelessly to plant seeds, water the crops, and care for the land. Yet anyone can walk in and destroy what he has built. No one would call that wisdom. They would say he failed to protect what was valuable. The same principle applies to your life. Your character, your peace, your purpose, and your emotional well-being are treasures. If you refuse to protect them, you should not be surprised when unhealthy people take advantage of your openness. One reason people struggle to establish boundaries is that they confuse guilt with responsibility. They feel guilty whenever someone becomes upset with them. They believe another person's disappointment automatically means they have done something wrong. But mature wisdom teaches a different lesson. Someone else's emotional reaction does not always determine whether your decision was right or wrong. People often become uncomfortable when they lose the ability to control someone they once manipulated. Their frustration may simply be evidence that your boundaries are working. There is an important difference between being loving and being available for abuse. Love encourages growth, honesty, patience, and understanding. Abuse demands silence, surrender, and endless accommodation. Love listens, abuse controls. Love respects individuality, abuse punishes independence. The moment you begin recognizing this difference, you stop feeling guilty for protecting yourself. You understand that refusing manipulation is not an act of hatred, it is an act of self-respect. Many people wait until they are emotionally exhausted before they finally establish boundaries. They tolerate years of criticism, guilt, disrespect, and emotional pressure. Then one day they reach their breaking point, and their response is often filled with anger because they allowed unhealthy behavior to continue for far too long. Wisdom teaches us not to wait until resentment grows. Healthy boundaries are easier to maintain than emotional recovery after years of neglect. It is also important to understand that boundaries reveal the quality of the relationships around you. Healthy people may not always like your boundaries, but they will learn to respect them. They understand that mutual respect strengthens relationships rather than weakens them. On the other hand, those who benefited from your lack of boundaries will often resist them. They may accuse you of changing. They may call you selfish, difficult, or unloving. But sometimes those accusations simply reveal that they were more comfortable with the version of you that never challenged their behavior. Do not let temporary criticism convince you to abandon permanent principles. Every worthwhile life is built upon convictions that remain firm even when they are unpopular. If your values disappear whenever someone becomes upset, then your life will always be directed by the emotions of others instead of the wisdom within you. Remember that your purpose requires protection. You cannot fulfill your highest calling while constantly recovering from unnecessary emotional battles. You cannot build your future if all your energy is consumed by people who refuse to honor your present. Every hour spent defending yourself against manipulation is an hour that could have been invested in growth, learning, serving, and becoming the person you were created to be. There comes a moment when you must stop asking, will they be upset if I establish this boundary, and begin asking, what will happen to my life if I never do? That single question changes everything. It shifts your focus from pleasing others to stewarding your own life with wisdom. It reminds you that your responsibility is not to make everyone comfortable. Your responsibility is to live with integrity, protect your peace, and honor the purpose placed within you. Never apologize for valuing what is valuable. Never feel ashamed for protecting your emotional health. Never believe that boundaries make you less compassionate. In reality, healthy boundaries make genuine love possible because they remove fear, resentment, and manipulation from the relationship. They allow respect to flourish where control once existed. They preserve your confidence, strengthen your character, and remind the world that kindness is not weakness. It is strength guided by wisdom. When you understand this truth, you stop allowing others to define your worth, and you begin living with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that self-respect is not optional. It is the foundation upon which every meaningful and healthy relationship must be built. One of the greatest advantages a manipulative person has is not their intelligence, their confidence, or even their words. Their greatest advantage is your emotional reaction. The moment they discover what makes you angry, guilty, fearful, or desperate for approval, they begin to use those emotions as tools. This is why wisdom is far more powerful than emotion. Emotions are valuable because they reveal what we feel, but they are dangerous when they become the ones making our decisions. A life directed by uncontrolled emotion is easily influenced by people who know how to provoke it. Manipulation rarely begins with obvious control. It often starts with small moments that seem harmless. A sarcastic comment disguised as a joke. A subtle criticism followed by, "You're too sensitive." A promise that is repeatedly broken followed by excuses that somehow become your responsibility to understand. Little by little, reality begins to shift. You start questioning your own judgment instead of questioning their behavior. You begin wondering whether you are expecting too much, overreacting, or remembering things incorrectly. This confusion is not an accident. It is often the result of repeated manipulation that slowly weakens your confidence in your own perception. One of the most common tactics used by controlling individuals is guilt. They understand that good-hearted people dislike disappointing others. So instead of making direct demands, they make you feel responsible for their emotions. If they are unhappy, somehow it becomes your fault. If they are angry, you are expected to fix it. If they experience consequences for their own choices, they subtly suggest that your actions force them into that position. Over time, you begin carrying burdens that never belong to you. You become emotionally exhausted because you are constantly trying to solve problems that someone else refuses to take responsibility for. Another powerful tactic is gaslighting. This happens when someone repeatedly causes you to doubt your own experiences, memories, or understanding of reality. They deny conversations that clearly happened. They rewrite events to make themselves appear innocent. They insist that your concerns are imaginary or exaggerated. Eventually, you begin trusting their version of reality more than your own. This is one of the most damaging forms of manipulation because it attacks the very foundation of your confidence. A person who no longer trusts their own judgment becomes dependent on someone else's interpretation of every situation. Then there is blame shifting. Instead of accepting responsibility for their actions, manipulative people often redirect attention toward your imperfections. Rather than discussing what they did wrong, the conversation suddenly becomes about something you did months or even years ago. The original issue is never resolved because the focus constantly changes. This creates endless cycles of conflict where accountability never exists. Without accountability, growth becomes impossible. There is also emotional intimidation. It does not always involve shouting or obvious threats. Sometimes it appears as silent treatment, emotional withdrawal, dramatic mood changes, or creating an atmosphere where you constantly feel anxious about saying the wrong thing. You begin walking on eggshells, carefully measuring every word because you fear triggering another emotional storm. The tragedy is that you slowly lose the freedom to be yourself. Instead of living with confidence, you live with caution. How do you respond to these patterns? Not with more anger, not with louder arguments, not by trying to out-manipulate the manipulator. Wisdom responds differently. Wisdom refuses to participate in emotional games. It recognizes manipulation for what it is and chooses clarity instead of chaos. Calmness is not weakness. Calmness is evidence that your emotions are serving your judgment instead of controlling it. When someone attempts to provoke you, pause before responding. A thoughtful silence is often more powerful than an impulsive reaction. Manipulative people frequently expect immediate emotional responses because those responses are easier to control. But when you remain composed, you interrupt the pattern. You give yourself the opportunity to think instead of merely reacting. In that moment, you reclaim authority over your own mind. It is equally important to trust observable patterns rather than empty promises. Words can be persuasive, but character is revealed through consistent behavior. If someone repeatedly apologizes without changing, the apology loses its meaning. Genuine repentance is demonstrated by transformation, not simply by repeated expressions of regret. Wisdom does not ignore repeated evidence in favor of hopeful imagination. It evaluates actions over time and makes decisions based on reality rather than wishful thinking. You must also learn that you are not obligated to defend every accusation made against you. Manipulative individuals often create endless debates designed to exhaust you rather than discover the truth. They pull you into circular conversations where no explanation is ever sufficient because understanding was never their objective. Their objective was control. Wisdom recognizes when a conversation has stopped being productive and knows when to step away with dignity instead of remaining trapped in endless arguments. There is tremendous strength in refusing to allow another person's behavior to determine your own character. If they choose dishonesty, you choose integrity. If they choose manipulation, you choose truth. If they choose chaos, you choose peace. Your character should never become a reflection of someone else's dysfunction. The moment you allow bitterness to replace wisdom, manipulation has already achieved one of its greatest victories. Remember this. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel deeply without allowing feelings to override wisdom. It is remaining calm when others seek to provoke you. It is speaking truth without unnecessary hostility. It is establishing boundaries without hatred. It is walking away from destructive patterns without carrying resentment into your future. The strongest people are not those who win every argument. They are the ones who refuse to be controlled by arguments in the first place. They understand that protecting their peace is more valuable than proving a point. They recognize that every moment spent feeding manipulation is a moment stolen from their purpose. So they choose wisdom over impulse, discernment over confusion, and quiet confidence over emotional chaos. In doing so, they break the cycle of control and step into a life where their decisions are no longer governed by fear, guilt, or manipulation, but by truth, self-respect, and the unwavering conviction that their peace is worth protecting. One of the heaviest burdens a kind-hearted person can carry is the belief that it is their responsibility to rescue someone who refuses to take responsibility for themselves. Many people enter difficult relationships with noble intentions. They believe that enough patience will soften a hardened heart. Enough sacrifice will inspire gratitude. Enough love will awaken change. They convince themselves that if they simply refuse to give up, the other person will eventually become who they were always meant to be. While this hope may come from a place of compassion, it often leads to years of disappointment because it is built upon a dangerous misunderstanding. No one can transform another person's character against their will. Every lasting transformation begins with one essential decision: the decision to accept responsibility. Growth starts the moment a person stops blaming everyone else for their circumstances and begins examining their own choices. Without accountability, there is no foundation upon which genuine change can be built. A person may speak beautifully about becoming better, offer heartfelt apologies, and make countless promises. But if they refuse to acknowledge their own behavior honestly, those words become empty echoes that never produce lasting results. Many people mistake repeated apologies for personal growth. They hear "I'm sorry" and believe that change has already begun. But wisdom teaches us to look beyond words and observe patterns. Character is not measured by what someone promises during an emotional moment. Character is revealed by what they consistently do after the emotions have settled. Anyone can express regret when facing consequences. True maturity is demonstrated when behavior changes even after the crisis has passed. This is where many good people become trapped. They continue investing emotional energy into someone whose actions never match their promises. Every new excuse becomes another reason to wait. Every temporary improvement becomes proof that lasting change is just around the corner. Months become years, and years become decades. Meanwhile, the person hoping for transformation slowly loses confidence, peace, and joy because their life has become centered on managing someone else's dysfunction instead of pursuing their own purpose. You must understand something that can completely change the direction of your life. Love is powerful, but love cannot replace personal responsibility. You can encourage someone, support someone, pray for someone, forgive someone, and believe in someone's potential, but you cannot make their decisions for them. Every human being possesses the freedom to choose their own attitudes, behaviors, and values. Until they decide to use that freedom wisely, no amount of outside effort can permanently change what they refuse to confront within themselves. Imagine trying to help someone climb a mountain. You are willing to carry supplies, offer guidance, and even extend your hand when they stumble. But if they refuse to take a single step, no amount of your effort can move them forward. Eventually, you become exhausted from carrying weight that was never yours to carry. The problem was never your willingness to help. The problem was believing that your effort could replace their participation. This lesson applies to every unhealthy relationship. You are not responsible for another adult's refusal to grow. You are not responsible for someone else's unwillingness to seek wisdom, accept correction, or develop emotional maturity. Their choices belong to them. Your responsibility is to make wise choices for your own life. When you confuse these responsibilities, you begin sacrificing your future in an attempt to control something that has never been within your power. Many manipulators depend on this confusion. They subtly convince others that their happiness depends entirely upon someone else's sacrifice. They create the illusion that if you would simply love them more, argue less, give more, or tolerate a little longer, everything would finally improve. But the standard never stops moving. Every sacrifice becomes the expectation for the next sacrifice. Every compromise becomes permission for another demand. Eventually, you discover that the relationship was never moving toward health. It was moving toward greater dependency and control. One of the greatest expressions of wisdom is recognizing the difference between helping someone and enabling them. Helping empowers people to become responsible for their own lives. Enabling protects people from the consequences that could motivate them to change. When you continually remove every consequence from another person's destructive behavior, you may unintentionally delay the very growth you hope to see. Sometimes allowing someone to face the results of their own choices is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of truth. There comes a moment when you must stop asking, how can I fix them? And begin asking, how can I remain faithful to my own purpose? That question changes everything. It redirects your attention from controlling another person's future to stewarding your own life wisely. It reminds you that your dreams, your calling, your peace, and your character deserve the same care and attention that you have spent giving to everyone else. Do not allow guilt to convince you that protecting your emotional health means you have failed someone. There is a profound difference between abandoning a person and refusing to participate in unhealthy patterns. You can continue wishing someone well without surrendering your identity. You can forgive without becoming vulnerable to repeated harm. You can care deeply while still recognizing that every individual must eventually choose whether they will grow or remain exactly where they are. Your life was never designed to become a rescue mission that has no end. It was designed to become a testimony of wisdom, courage, integrity, and purpose. The greatest contribution you can make to the world is not losing yourself in someone else's refusal to change. It is becoming the strongest, healthiest, and most faithful version of yourself. Your example of discipline, truth, and self-respect will often speak louder than years of pleading ever could. Never underestimate the power of releasing responsibilities that were never yours to carry. The moment you stop trying to control another person's decisions, you reclaim the energy needed to build your own future. You begin investing in your growth instead of your frustration. You replace anxiety with clarity. You exchange exhaustion for peace. And you finally understand that genuine love is never measured by how much of yourself you are willing to lose. Genuine love is measured by the wisdom to honor truth, the courage to respect healthy boundaries, and the humility to recognize that lasting transformation can only begin when a person chooses it for themselves. The greatest protection you will ever have against manipulation is not a sharper tongue, greater physical strength, or the ability to win every argument. Your greatest protection is becoming the kind of person who cannot easily be controlled. When your identity is secure, your purpose is clear, and your values are firmly established, unhealthy people lose much of their influence over your life. They may still attempt to manipulate you, but their efforts no longer determine your decisions because your confidence is no longer dependent upon their approval. Many people spend years trying to change the people around them, but they neglect the one person over whom they have complete responsibility, themselves. They study the behavior of difficult individuals, analyze every conversation, and search endlessly for the perfect response that will finally make everything better. Yet true freedom does not begin when someone else changes. It begins when you become emotionally strong enough that another person's behavior no longer controls your peace. Think of a tree standing during a violent storm. The storm may shake its branches, but it cannot easily uproot a tree whose roots run deep. The strength of the tree is not found in the absence of wind. It is found beneath the surface, where no one can see the foundation supporting it. Human character works the same way. The challenges of life reveal what has already been built within you. If your confidence depends on circumstances remaining easy or on people always treating you well, then every difficult relationship will shake your stability. But when your identity is rooted in truth, discipline, and purpose, you remain steady even when life becomes unpredictable. Purpose is one of the strongest defenses against manipulation. A person who knows why they are living is far less likely to become distracted by unnecessary drama. They recognize that every hour spent arguing with someone committed to misunderstanding them is an hour stolen from their mission. They become more protective of their attention because they understand that attention is one of life's most valuable resources. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. Where your energy goes, your future is built. This is why disciplined people often appear peaceful. They have learned to direct their focus toward what they can build instead of becoming consumed by what they cannot control. They refuse to allow every criticism to interrupt their progress. They do not chase every argument, answer every accusation, or defend themselves against every misunderstanding. They understand that not every battle deserves their participation. Some victories are won simply by refusing to enter conflicts that lead nowhere. Emotional maturity also plays a crucial role in protecting your life. Maturity does not mean you never experience disappointment, anger, or sadness. It means those emotions no longer become the architects of your decisions. You acknowledge your feelings without allowing them to control your actions. This ability creates remarkable stability because manipulative people often depend upon emotional unpredictability. They seek immediate reactions, impulsive decisions, and emotionally charged responses. When you remain calm, thoughtful, and patient, you quietly remove many of the tools they rely upon. Another essential quality is confidence, built upon character rather than comparison. Many people seek confidence through achievements, popularity, appearance, or the opinions of others. While these things may provide temporary encouragement, they are unstable foundations because they constantly change. Real confidence comes from knowing that your actions consistently align with your values values. When you become a person of integrity, you no longer need constant reassurance because your self-respect is built upon daily choices rather than external applause. Developing wisdom also requires learning to enjoy your own company. People who fear loneliness often tolerate unhealthy relationships simply because they believe any relationship is better than no relationship. But solitude used wisely is not loneliness, it is preparation. It is an opportunity to grow, reflect, learn, and strengthen your character. A person who is comfortable standing alone will never remain in destructive environments simply to avoid temporary discomfort. They understand that peaceful solitude is far healthier than constant chaos disguised as companionship. You must also become intentional about the voices you allow to shape your thinking. Every day your mind is influenced by conversations, books, mentors, experiences, and habits. If you continually surround yourself with negativity, confusion, and emotional instability, those influences gradually become part of your own thinking. But when you consistently expose yourself to wisdom, truth, discipline, and uplifting ideas, your perspective changes. You begin recognizing unhealthy patterns more quickly because your standards have become stronger. Personal growth is not a single decision. It is a daily commitment. Every day you choose whether you will become more patient or more bitter, more disciplined or more careless, more courageous or more fearful. These small daily choices quietly shape the person you become. Long before anyone sees the results, your habits are already determining your future. This is why lasting strength is never built through dramatic moments alone. It is built through ordinary days filled with consistent, intentional decisions. Remember that protecting your peace does not require you to become cold or suspicious of everyone. It simply requires wisdom. Continue to be compassionate, but let your compassion be guided by discernment. Continue to be generous, but do not sacrifice your purpose to satisfy unhealthy expectations. Continue to forgive, but never confuse forgiveness with permission for repeated disrespect. Continue to love people, but never abandon yourself in the process. As your confidence grows, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop chasing acceptance because you have discovered your own value. You stop fearing rejection because your identity is no longer built upon other people's opinions. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you because your energy is now invested in fulfilling your purpose instead of defending your existence. Your peace becomes stronger than their chaos. Your wisdom becomes greater than their manipulation. Your discipline becomes more powerful than their distractions. Never forget this final truth. The strongest life is not built by controlling others. It is built by mastering yourself. When you govern your thoughts with wisdom, your emotions with maturity, your habits with discipline, and your decisions with integrity, you become a person who cannot easily be shaken. Manipulative people may still appear in your life, but they will no longer define it. Your future will be directed by purpose instead of pressure, by conviction instead of confusion, and by the quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth, guarding your peace, and refusing to surrender the life you were created to live.